Let's get cracking then. So hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, which we've titled Setting Your Teams and Organisation Up for Success This Year with Gemma Honour, John Inge Hervik and David Lowe. Today we have a fascinating talk for you all about some common problems teams are facing and the real reasons underlying them. And then we'll share some different perspectives and a technique or two for you to try. If it's your first AWA community event, then we welcome you very, very warmly and with open arms. I'm Ashley, I'm the account manager at AWA Global, also sister consultancy, Brighter Work as well. And we run events like this almost every month, either online or in person. And you can join those either through our website or through Meetup, which is a site that we use to also organise these events. And we record all of them if they're delivered online, which you can find on our YouTube channel. And I'll put the link to subscribe to that in the chat as well, so you can use that. And everything we do is underpinned by our mission to make working life better through training, community, coaching and consulting, as well as creating content, writing books and models, all in the name of helping make working life better. And today we will be hearing from David Lowe, who is a business coach and a trainer of our popular Agile Team Coaching course and an expert in Scrum, Kanban and creating better ways to deliver products. We also have Gemma Honour, who is co-founder of Brighter Work, AWA's sister consultancy, who's passionate about visualization and creating better workplaces and products. And we also have John Inge Hervik, who is head of training and coaching at AWA Norge and is an expert in systems and leadership coaching and development. Throughout the next 45 minutes to an hour, we invite you to join in the conversation, ask questions, or of course you can just sit back and enjoy the time that we have together. I've also seen a few people are driving as well. So if you are driving, maybe don't get involved, just listen. But if you park up or finish your journey, then of course feel free to get involved as well. And you can learn more about the topics we'll be covering on our upcoming Agile Team Coaching courses, or we can partner with you to focus on key challenges and goals through bespoke workshops and clinics. Through this time, you couldn't be in better hands than with our hosts today to explore this topic. So I'll hand over to you, David, Gemma, and John Inge.
Thank you, Ash. I think I'm going to hire you, Ash, for every time I appear anywhere. I felt like I was about to get into a ring for boxing or wrestling, or I don't know, doing a concert. Anyway, yes. So welcome everyone. We have been looking at 2024. Everyone wants a successful 2024, no doubt. And we've been discussing what kind of things we see frequently in real life organizations that might stop it being successful. So we've got 45 minutes here. We've brought 3 topics that we think are very common. And I'm sure that you will have experienced, if not recently, as in already this year, you will have seen before somewhere. But please feel free to put some other suggestions in the chat, and we will adjust accordingly on the time. So we'll go faster on these 3 if there's some suggestions. So the first one I pose to my colleagues is, my teams aren't motivated. Right? So we're not going to name any names from any specific organizations, but I'm sure you've seen this. People say, my teams aren't motivated. So who wants to pick this one up first?
Well, I can go, and I'll start by talking a bit about one of our beliefs as well. So the people believe we have this focus on motivational purpose. And we talk also about the emotional connection that we need in order to get emotions, get the motivation, purpose, and to be motivated as a team. So it's really about how can we find ways of seeing what are we actually there to achieve together. So we have this purpose, we are looking for outcomes. So it's really about focusing on that first, I think, to connect with that motivational purpose. And it needs to be meaningful and desirable. So I'll pitch in on one technique that I really like, and that is when we facilitate the purpose, we get a systemic view that we invite other people perspective in, or might even just look at if the market had been in the room with us, what would they see? If the leadership were in the room with us, even if our families were in the room, what is really our purpose together? So we get that systemic view as well. And then connected to how is that with our values? So facilitating a systemic view on motivational purpose is my first.
Already, should we count the amount of times that John Inge talks about systems in this call? We should have a spread bet on how many times we're going to get it. Okay, good. Thank you, John Inge. Gemma, anything you want to add?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's a really good question. And I think we can hear about like lack of motivations in team, but often we forget about what if our leadership team actually starts to lose motivation. And that can happen, and we've seen it happen in some of the clients that we've been interacting with, where actually leadership teams are facing like a really high degree of uncertainty. And that might be some kind of business uncertainty where you know that there's huge potential for organizational change or even like business change and market change on the horizon. And what that can do is actually kind of create and trigger a lot of kind of actually quite a lot of fear within leaders and a lot of uncertainty, and then you'll see like a drop in the motivation in terms of how to kind of face into that change. And so a really good way that leaders can kind of, if they're in that position and they're lacking that motivation for those reasons of uncertainty, is to think about what they can do as leaders to get themselves and their teams ready for that change. And so a lot of the work that we do at Brighter Work is around kind of making sure that we're supporting people in the right way so that they can, no matter what's coming up at them in the future, they can do that. And so some really good techniques that we can use around that is, for example, running some change workshops that help to build self-awareness and awareness of the emotional reaction to change. And the various different stages of change, building that awareness of the stages of change and where you sit in terms of your reaction to the stages of change can really help you as a leader adjust and be able to bring people with you. Then also helping your teams to actually lead change well. Ways that we can do that is by introducing things like the enterprise change pattern into the organization, so that your kind of leadership team are actually working in a way that deals with uncertainty. The enterprise change pattern is great because actually it's built for the unknown. It means that you're kind of addressing your reaction to uncertainty by actually saying, let's do some experimentation around that and feed the results of that experimentation into the culture and into the way of doing things.
And we should say, if anyone doesn't think that they're in an uncertain environment, then we're very happy to have a discussion about that on another time. But don't start me off on that one. Okay, well, I'm going to throw something else in that ties that together with a team, as I tend to focus on team coaching. And I often find that the teams get more motivated when they actually can see what is happening. And so with John Inge, with his systems, I'm afraid people are going to recognize this, that I've talked about a few times before, about outcomes over outputs, brilliantly described by someone who I'm going to put in the chat when I remember their name, Josh Seiden, about looking at what we're trying to achieve. So what is the outcome? What is the behavior change that we're looking to achieve, set by leadership? And then the team is looking at how to achieve that, right? So what is the output? What is the tangible thing we're going to do in order to achieve that outcome? And with that comes another really important thing, which is metrics. How are we going to measure that we are moving towards that outcome? This is a brilliant problem for Agile to be used for, right? We've got an uncertain future. We're in an unpredictable environment, but we want to achieve this behavior change, this outcome. So how are we going to do it? Well, we don't know. So we'll do some testing, as you said, right? We'll do some experiments, we'll do all of those things, and we will measure whether we're getting towards that or not as we go along, right? Through our incremental and iterative development. Easy, right? It's all you got to do. But having the team know what it is that they're trying to strive for and empowering them to be able to say, this is what we're going to do to try to achieve that, but having some way of measuring it. And again, I'm not going to go off into lots of things about OKRs or one metric that matters or North Star metrics and stuff like that. Loads of that stuff is out there, and happy to point you in the direction. Of course, it's in one or two of my books, but I'm not going to mention any of my books on this call. Yes, having the team know this is how we're going to measure where we're going is a really crucial thing. And leadership shouldn't be forgotten in this, in that they should be setting this is the outcome, right? Leadership, and whether that's your product owner, if we're talking in a Scrum environment, I'm not talking about senior leadership, but it may be that they are the people who need to set it. But knowing where you're going, it sounds a simple thing, and yet I go into so many organizations and people can't explain it. They direct me to a 30-page handbook that is about strategy, which doesn't actually tell me the answer. So I'm going to get off my soapbox. Anything that either of you want to add, or anything in the chat that we've had added, because I cannot focus on running this session and read the chat.
Yeah. So just building a bit on what you said there about meeting the teams and focusing on that outcome. And you mentioned several different techniques there, but also just simply asking ourselves in the everyday. So how is it connected to the outcomes, the strategic or the monthly or the quarterly or the purpose of the business? Just checking in with ourselves with this powerful question of, so how is this work we are doing connected with what we are supposed to be doing? And also, what is important about that? So we can check in very often. So I really like what you're saying there, David.
That's great. And then also in the chat, we've got James Taylor, who recently did a retrospective on motivation, which was focused on purpose, autonomy, and mastery. And yeah, so those are like a really great way of thinking about, like you guys were saying, that kind of connection to purpose, and how are we actually measuring whether we're getting closer to that purpose. Autonomy, around making sure that actually we've got teams that are able to run those experiments for themselves, to be able to learn and be able to adjust in the way that they need to be able to do within that kind of bounded set of constraints. And then mastery, actually being able to develop your own practice and feel like you're actually really good and really knowledgeable at something. And that is a really good point, James, cannot be underrated as well. So thank you. Really great point.
And here you go. This is just for fun, but who can be the first person to type in the chat? Not that this author came up with that idea. They've kind of stolen it from other places. Let's say merged it together, but who wrote a book called Drive that focus on those two things? Darren has got it right already. Didn't even get to finish the question. Damn pink. Well done, Darren. You can take a bow at the end of the session if you'd like. Okay, there we go. You didn't know it was going to be so much fun, did you? As well as informational. Right. Shall we move on to the next topic, John Inge and Gemma?
Yeah, let's do that. But I just reminded of, you said fun is also something to work with toward motivation. So with that, absolutely, I'm ready.
Well, Gemma said no.
I don't agree. I don't think we should move on at all. I like just hanging about, just talking about the old books.
I think we should just carry on. Gemma is segueing to our second topic, which is my team isn't working well together. I presume that's what you're doing, or we're just having a row. I'm not sure. So my team aren't working well together. Gemma, I'm gonna pick on you, I think, as John Inge started the next one. So what have you got to say about this?
Oh yeah, conflict in teams. It's a really tricky topic, and sometimes like we've experienced leadership teams where, especially, and I think everybody in this room will have experienced leadership teams where that conflict is sometimes like running under the surface, so it's not something that's really visible. And as coaches, we need to be able to create some like really safe space for people to be able to resolve that conflict in ways that are really productive, and kind of get a sense of purpose. And so some techniques that might be able to help you do that in say a workshop setting or a group coaching setting is to first of all see whether you can kind of get some points of data. So that might be through doing something like a 360-degree leadership analysis to actually get some feedback from the so that those leaders are getting some feedback from the teams that are around them, so that you can actually see if there are kind of problems from their own leadership style. There might also, you could also run like a team dynamics type assessment, which helps the team to understand how well they are performing as a team. So one of the really key things is that there's not going to be like a motivation for a team to deal with conflict if actually they're able to meet their purpose and they're working well. It's really unlikely though that they are, and so being able to show them that actually they're not getting the optimal outcomes that they need, and because of the way that they're working together, is really important. Once you've got that baseline data, you might then be able to do some kind of coaching, which maybe starts to develop an understanding of the story of that team. What's the story that that team tell about themselves? So you could get the team to pick a metaphor or a film that describes their story, and then use that to explore a little bit more about the roles that they play within that story. So a recent example of a team that we worked with recently chose a disaster movie, and then they worked out their various roles within that disaster movie. So that's like a really interesting way of going, okay, and then what could we do to retell the story? What would your roles look like if that disaster movie was to end in a different way? And so that can be like a really powerful tool to kind of actually start people seeing how they can align to get the outcomes that they want. Jon Inge, I'm sure you've got like a kind of systemic analysis of how we address this, so I'm looking forward to hearing.
But I'm also let's hear from David first. So I'll go last this time.
Okay. I've just got to get images of, like, I've taken that session, Gemma, for that everyone was dressing up as it as well. So I've now got the image of someone dressed up as Kate Winslet and someone dressed up as an iceberg. But I'm going to try and get that in my head. One thing I'd like to add on to yours is that, and I don't think this gets enough airplay because I think it still has a stigma around it, certainly in the UK, of Lego serious play. Like when you're actually visualizing what something is, it doesn't have to be Lego. I'd be interested to know how many people on this call have used Lego serious play and what they feel about it, because I haven't used it enough. But it's a damn good reason to buy some Lego. Okay, so again, focusing on the teams and stuff, many people who are on the call will probably anticipate what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about, let's get a common understanding. Let's get some rules. I liken this to Monopoly when I'm training, that there are different rules for Monopoly. When you land on free parking, some people say that you just have a rest. Some people say that you get all the money in the middle. Some people say that you, one person even said, the next time you land on anyone else's property, you don't have to pay the fee. If you had all these different people playing different rules, it'd be chaos. And yet we have teams that are far more important than a game of Monopoly, although maybe not in my house. But yes, teams that we don't set up the rules beforehand. So now we're talking about things like core protocols. We're talking about team alliances. And again, on team alliances, facilitating something so that you as a team are all in agreement with how you're going to perform and everybody's bought into it is a massively undervalued session or skill to be able to do, Because often you have people saying, well, I didn't agree to that. So getting a way of doing that is really useful.
Yeah.
Conflict, I'm going to add on to that as well. Letting conflict just ride. I've seen people do this. I've joined organizations where there's been an ongoing issue between members of the team, and no one's dealing with it because it's horrible, because they don't want to. They'd rather live in the misery and the conflict than actually deal with it, which is obviously not very nice. Emily, I'm with you on the rules of Monopoly. Of course, you get the money in the middle. That is my favorite rule of Monopoly as well. But there are other people out there in the world who don't think like us. I'm not going to say they're wrong. Yes, and so getting teams working well together as a team. Again, if you don't have, and I'm sorry, I'm one trick pony now, I'm starting to sound like, but if you don't have a reason to be working together, you're going to find that they start to get disparate. They're going to go off and do their own stuff. Again, 5 dysfunctions of a team. Let's play another game. Who wrote 5 dysfunctions of a team? Put that in the chat just for fun. It's stating all of those things. It's not just the conflict. Thank you, Ivor. Ivor can come and take a bow at the end of the session. Patrick Lencioni, or however he pronounces his name, talks about this, that the last dysfunction that he talks about is that we will focus on our own goals if we don't have, and we don't focus on a united goal. So if we're not looking at that outcome and measuring, are we moving towards it? People just go off and start doing their own stuff. I had one team that the devs, and it was a techie firm, the devs were just going off and learning a new type of code for the thing they were doing because they weren't measuring. No one was measuring whether or not the output was a success. You know, the tangible thing did actually achieve the goal. Well, it was done. That was all that was being measured. Is it live? Which is not a good focus. So I'm all about team alliances, sorting out your team values. It's fine for an organization to have those values. Right, we've got trust, or we are customer focused, or whatever. They're all good. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have those as organizational values, but are those values the same values for your team? Your team are individual people with their own values. What is important to them? And let's find out how we can join those together, ideally aligned with the organization's values as well, so that we actually care about what we're doing.
Yeah.
John Inge, come on, I'm desperate to hear about your systems thinking.
Yeah.
You don't have to talk about systemic.
Start with some unsystematic, or maybe it's everything's a system. So this will also be part of it. And that's the relational part of just being connected. So especially when people started working more remote, we see that also that the people who already have good connections, good relationships, even our friends, they are able to hold that also in the workplace. But people who are new to each other might struggle a bit, and you see forming of different small alliances even within a team. So just doing simple stuff like having a virtual coffee, doing non-work related things as well, just to build a bit of that humanity into that, so that we would like to work together. So as both Gemma and David said, we need to have a reason for doing something together, the purpose of us. Mastery goes into that as well. So we need to have that relational, why would we like to spend time together? What are we trying to achieve? On that note, I think that building common ground is really good, as was mentioned as well. Using the parking lot in some kind of facilitation where we're working towards common goals or even conflict resolution could be a great practice to have. Instead of going into the hard conflicts, let's park them for now and work on our common ground already. How can we build more on what we already are achieving? And those other things might start getting easier to work with, because now we are mastering things, and that is a great glue to work together. So you're wanting to work more together for mastering things together. You, Gemma, you mentioned roles, and I really, really like that role-playing thing to also unpack some of the roles. So another way of working with roles more directly, especially if they are really motivated towards getting somewhere, but they are struggling to wanting to work together, is not only look at the outer roles, what we do in our work. So who is holding the ladder, who is painting the wall, but what is our inner roles? So who is going to be the devil's advocate in our team? Who is going to be the cheerleader? Who's going to make sure that we get these virtual coffees and are also have that relational topic on this? So all of these roles, they're part of the system. So this is the system word again. So they're part of the system, it's part of the team, it's not part of us. So that means when we have a facilitation, just figuring out what are the different roles we have in our team, what would we like more of? Do we need more cheerleading? Maybe we need less cheerleading. But we could also swap roles. So who will be the devil's advocate this week? Maybe someone is tired of being the devil's advocate or being the cheerleader for that sake. So working with roles as a thing is also something that can help a team work well together. And you see a lot of this, especially when there is one person that everyone knows, oh, he's going to do this. What is the role that he is having or she is having that is causing this strain on the system and on the team? Could we try to swap it? What is the good intention behind that role, for instance? Looking there and see how can we, in other ways, support what is needed. So yeah, working with roles really thoroughly, I would say, is a good way to start working well or better together, at least. I think I only used the systems word one time there, David. Or did you count?
I don't worry, we're counting. So I'm going to try and time box it. We've got up to 3 minutes to finish this conversation. Anything that anyone would like to add in, especially, I think, around teams are finding this more and more, and I don't want to keep going back to COVID and stuff, but you know, our new world, lots of people are working from home more. I don't feel it's helping teams work well together. I don't know if anyone else has found anything different, but not having those moments where you are just having that idle chat about something nonsensical does impact it. Anything specifically from what we've talked about that you think comes to mind for this?
I kind of think human beings need to have that like actual in physical space sense of connection. That's one of our human needs. And so actually making some time to do that, even if you are in a kind of fairly remote working situation, I think cannot be underestimated. And there's a balance to be had as well. Like it's fine, I think, to kind of be doing that as collaboration time, but also is there time for just social bonding as well? So being able to do things like go out for a meal together or sit and have coffee and chat together to actually really start to kind of build those social connections. Because I think there's a lot of communication that gets missed when we're kind of just talking through our little square in Zoom. There's and there's also just a need that we have. If you like look into, I'm quite interested in transactional analysis, but Byrne's got the idea of human hungers. One of those human hungers is the need for contacts. I think it just helps reassure each other that we're real people. And it kind of just also builds that sense of empathy. So yeah, I think there's nothing quite like actually making some time to meet in person and just sort of seeing how that changes the dynamic of how you work together on a day-to-day basis.
Another flaw in the human race. As soon as the robots will take over and we'll be all better off for it. Before that opens up, I'm going to move on. So our final topic that we feel, and this is my favourite. So I'm going to take this first, as I've made you take one first so far. My team has been feeling really overwhelmed. 2024 is looking even busier. What can we do to avoid burnout and feeling overwhelmed? Are you okay with me taking this first, Gemma and John Inge?
Go for it.
Absolutely.
Can anyone tell me what I'm going to say first off? in the chat. What word am I going to use? Keep it clean. It's a clean word. Good topic, agency. The one I've been banging on about before is where I was going with this. So focusing on what we're trying to achieve. What is our outcome? Right? What is the goal of this? Now, specifically on this, is about not doing too much. I don't know how many places I've been where a shiny thing comes up, they start doing it. Another shiny thing comes up, they start doing it. And then it just carries on and on and on, right? We've only got so many people. We've only got so much ability. We've only got so much capacity, if you want to call it that, in terms of a lean approach. And yet we're overflowing that system by putting too much stuff in. And often people are saying, well, look, this is a leadership. The leadership has to understand this. We all have responsibility in this. Right? We can only do so much. And whether this is in our product or service, we can only do so much in that at that level. Whether this is all the way up to the top level of portfolios of all of our, whatever you want to call them, projects, initiatives, that we all have a responsibility to contain that capacity, however we're doing it. If we're going to talk about work in progress limits or whatever, at whatever level, nobody should be saying that it is someone else's responsibility. We all have our own level of focus. We all have a responsibility. So I'm going to pose it to you. I didn't know it was going to be so confrontational. I'm going to pose it to all of you to have a think today about whether you are realistically doing too much. Because I know most people on here, I suspect that most people on here are doing too much than they can actually do effectively. And so how effective could you be if you did less? I'm not saying just do one thing at a time. I'm not saying you can't do 2 things or 3 things. I don't know what your capacity is. I'm loving Francesco's comment here about, is it capacity or perception? We can come back to that in a moment. Because otherwise I'll just talk for the whole rest of the session here. So that's my starting point. Gemma and John Inge, at the risk of me not facilitating it how I should, I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you. But I'm happy to take this topic back whenever you are willing to pass it back to me.
Yeah. Gemma, would you like to go?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with everything David said there. The importance of prioritization is absolutely massive. I think one of the pitfalls to it is it can be quite difficult to know what to prioritize when you're in a state of burnout, when your kind of adrenaline's pumping and a lot of information is coming from a lot of different directions, and actually you're starting to feel massively overwhelmed and exhausted. So I was thinking of this really in relation to the types of rest that you might need to be able to have that clarity of thinking that would allow you to make the prioritization decisions that you need. So yeah, I don't know, again, like if anybody wants to put into the chat like what they know about the different types of rest, please do. I understand them to be the physical need to rest. So for example, just making sure that you're getting a decent quality night's sleep is really important. But it also might be some kind of nourishing type of bodily activity such as yoga as well that can really bring about a sense of rest. Mental rest as well, like actually making sure that you're taking thinking breaks. I have to actually enforce this for myself. For a while I was just thinking about work 24/7. I think there's some people who know me on this call, and at the weekend if they asked me how work was going, I would just say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to talk about that because I need to make sure that I'm getting the mental rest. They're asking for all the right reasons, but it's actually being able to create some boundaries in your own mind as well to be able to make sure that you're getting decent quality rest. There's also creative rest as well, so making sure that you're surrounded by beautiful art, making sure you go out for a walk, look at the countryside around you, and And then there's also emotional rest. So that can be if you're hearing quite a lot of, like, especially for people who are supporting teams, and particularly for people within the coaching community, you can be hearing quite a lot of anxiety or worry or sadness, and be carrying quite a lot of other people's emotions. So making sure that actually you're putting in, again, appropriate boundaries and knowing what ends with you is really important on that one. And then finally, there's spiritual rest as well. So actually making sure that you've got some time for your own inner development. And a lot of these things, I think, actually you can probably get through social connection. So being able to actually make sure that you're getting emotionally supported by your friends. But actually, sometimes if your friends are in a position where they just kind of want to fix things for you, or actually you've got like confidential information that you can't take to a friendship group, making sure that you've got some other type of support. So for example, reaching out to a trusted mentor, or putting into place some coaching support can be really valuable. So yeah. Thank you.
Can I just jump in before Jon Inge does? Just on your thing about your point about downtime, is that lots of people make assumptions about what downtime is for everyone. And that's not true. Like writing, for me, I find a way of relaxing, and yet other people would say, well, that's stressful, right? So, and people try to put mindfulness. I know lots of people do this at the start of workshops and stuff. Let's have a bit of mindfulness. Some people, that stresses them out more than anything else, because it just doesn't work for them. So please don't assume that how you relax is how other people are going to relax.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And I think it's absolutely finding out what it is for you that makes sure that you get that sense of space and nourishment, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't bring up me writing, because obviously that leads to me talking about my books. Jon Inge.
Well, I'm just thinking of what you're talking about as well, and for me, so hearing the overwhelming part. So we are overwhelmed, and I think that overwhelming of the senses is a really great to just check in. So is that what we are? Are we overwhelmed on the senses, or are we overburdened even? So because working on limiting work in progress might be reducing the overwhelm of our senses, but it could also be that we're just scared really because things are changing. So really connecting with how much complexity and how much is changing all of the time, that could be overwhelming, even though you're working on small things at a time. So you touched upon it, but a really good technique I like, and I've seen you do this on the webinar as well, David, is just the circle of control. So what things are overwhelming you? So just write them down, or the team. So what kind of things are fueling that overwhelm? And then make a circle and move everything that you can impact, can have control, into the circle of control, or circle of impact. That could be a very simple tool to just start seeing what can I, when can I not do anything about. And another straightforward thing is start planning in iterations. So we do this all the time in Agile. So having these smaller cadences of just planning and replanning, and knowing that things can change and I can replan. I think a lot of the mindset in how we are used to going about our lives, trying to figure out, trying to find that plan and predicting and planning long ahead so that we can feel safe, we can feel that we're going to land safe. That can also start overwhelming us when everything is changing at once, or it seems like that. Even if it's only the backlog changing because of different needs, or it might be something influencing our system from the outside, from our family. So just trying to replan and get into that mindset as well, that, okay, so this is the plan, and next week we're going to change it, or even tomorrow we're going to change it. Still need to have some kind of idea of what is the next step. And if the senses are really overwhelmed, just break it down into smaller steps. Get into the breathing. find some calm first, and then try breaking things into smaller steps for the team. One thing I'm also noticing that I would really like to address is if we are overburdened, if that is the main thing. Maybe we're overwhelmed as well, but it might be overburdening. So what kind of facilitation could you do with your managers or other teams as well? So how can we start creating those alliances with the rest of the organization? Because maybe we do need to do all of these things because we are struggling as a company or whatever reason, but we also know we're not going to perform when we're overwhelmed. So how can we start having those conversations into the system, around us, upwards, within our team, just to say, okay, so if we get overburdened or overwhelmed, how are we dealing with that? So it's just back to the good old, how, as you said, the outcome focus. What are we trying to achieve together, and how are we going to be together when we achieve that? Because being overwhelmed is not going to help anyone really. So what is the negotiations? That's my yes.
Which brings me back. That's full circle. And I think that comes back to Francesco's comment in the chat, which is about capacity over perception. I'm willing to invite Francesco to clarify what they mean about that. I just wanted to add in, because I don't think I made it clear in that early discussion about limiting the amount of stuff. Doing too much is massively inefficient. If you are focusing on outcomes and you have metrics, sorry to bring that up again, but everyone can see that you are progressing towards something. Frequent releases, getting that confidence that actually you are making progress, because of course other people might see you limiting the amount of work, saying I'm too busy. Well, that's not the point. It's not that I'm too busy or I'm too lazy or I don't want to do it. It's the fact that actually it's a stupid way of working, right? It is not efficient at all. And therefore you're going to get less out of people. And so proving that actually doing less makes progress is really important. So all of those things tie together. And so then it's not about perception. It is about capacity, because you are actually showing that you are making progress and that you're delivering on stuff. If you're not, of course, then maybe change what you're doing. Francesco, I don't know. I'm inviting you to come on to the chat if you wish to clarify anything on that. But I also
I don't know if you can hear me.
We can, Francesco.
Good. So welcome and thank you for your explanations. Basically, yes. Sometimes it's about capacity, as you said, and when I say sometimes it's about perception, is because I think you also mentioned that it's for the prioritization. So basically, if you prioritize well, you know what to do. There is something you can say no, because sometimes it's about saying yes too much.
Yeah, well, and prioritizing, I'm going to say prioritizing, especially on those outcomes, right? So the business should be deciding, or whoever should be deciding, whoever's in that leadership position of, this is the most important outcome that we want. Are we moving towards it? Have we moved enough towards it to then prioritize something else over it? If we're actually focusing on the outcomes rather than the outputs, then this conversation is a lot easier to have, because the response often to my comment about outcomes over outputs, and I would just like to say organizations I've worked with who have moved to an outcome focused have said it's massively changed in a positive way how they're working. That and I've forgotten where I was going with that now. Right at the end, I've forgotten what the thread I was on. That yes, focusing on outcomes rather than on the outputs at that level, we can see if we're making that progress. I'm going to shut up because I've got a risk of going on and on and on. We are at the end of our 45 minutes. I'm happy to hang around for a little bit longer if anybody else has the things they want to discuss, but we're not going to overrun. Unless anyone else has anything that they wish to add from John Inge and Gemma, I'm going to thank everyone for coming.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed that, guys. There's some fascinating insight there into setting up teams. I really liked the stuff about avoiding burnout as well. So on a personal level, I go to the gym, I go running, etc., etc. There's a lot of things that I had in my own mindset of blocking that time out, because other people were like, no, it's fine, you go and take your time to go and do that, it's absolutely fine. But in my own mind, I was thinking, I have to rush back, I have to still continue with doing things, whereas that pressure wasn't from anyone else, it was just internal and it was in my own mind. But it's really key to take that time out and understand that it's fine to do that, it's absolutely okay to do that. So I thought that was a really interesting topic. So thank you, Gemma, John Inge and David. And guys, if you would like to learn more on receiving expert support on helping your teams overcome challenges they're facing by focusing on those outcomes rather than output or any other topics we raised in today's webinar, then you can contact me directly. You can visit our website as well. We have loads of free guides and bits and pieces, freebies that you can download. And of course, if you have any questions on those, then feel free to get into contact with us using the website or getting in touch with myself directly as well. But thank you so much, everyone.